Some songs don't fail, they just arrive too early. Buried by trends, ignored by radio, or lost in the noise of their time, these tracks seemed destined to disappear. But something strange happened. Years later, they came back stronger, louder, and impossible to ignore. These are the songs that prove timing can be wrong, but greatness never is. And when the world finally listens, everything changes. Number 15. Under Pressure, 1981. When Queen teamed up with David Bowie, it should have been an instant explosion. Instead, Under Pressure arrived with confusion, clashing egos, and almost no clear promotion strategy. Even the recording session was chaotic, with both artists improvising under pressure, literally. At first, it performed well in the UK but didn't dominate globally the way you'd expect from two icons. In fact, it quickly became overshadowed by bigger solo releases and shifting musical trends. For years, it felt like a missed opportunity, but time rewrote everything. The song's haunting bass line became one of the most recognizable in music history. Then came revival moments, films, commercials, and eventually sampling in pop culture. Suddenly, the emotional weight of the song hit harder than ever. What once felt messy became legendary. Today, it's not just a collaboration. It's a cultural monument built on tension, brilliance, and a second chance the world couldn't ignore. Number 14. Fast Car, 1988. When Tracy Chapman released Fast Car, it didn't explode overnight. There were no flashy visuals, no heavy marketing push, and no immediate chart domination. Just a quiet voice telling a deeply personal story. At first, it moved slowly through the charts. Some stations hesitated to play it. It didn't fit the loud synthetic sound dominating the late 80s, and yet something about it lingered. Then came live performances. Audiences stopped, listened, felt it, word spread. The song began climbing, not because of hype, but because of connection. Over time, it crossed borders, generations, and genres. Decades later, it's still being rediscovered, covered, streamed, revered. What started as a slow burn became one of the most emotionally powerful songs ever recorded. Not because it shouted, but because it whispered something real, and the world eventually leaned in to hear it. Number 13. Heaven is a Place on Earth, 1987. By the time Belinda Carlisle released Heaven is a Place on Earth, expectations were uncertain. Transitioning from band fame to solo success is rarely smooth. And early reactions, cautious at best. The song didn't immediately dominate. It entered the charts quietly, without the explosive debut labels hoped for. Critics weren't convinced. It felt like just another pop attempt in a crowded era. But then something shifted. Radio picked it up. Audiences connected with its soaring optimism. And suddenly, momentum kicked in. The chorus became unavoidable. What followed was a complete turnaround. The song climbed charts worldwide, becoming a defining anthem of the decade. Over time, it didn't just survive, it became essential. A song that once faced doubt now defines an era, proof that sometimes all a song needs is time and the right moment to be heard. Number 12. Blue Monday, 1983. When New Order released Blue Monday, it wasn't designed to be a mainstream hit. It was long, experimental, built for clubs, not charts. Initially, it didn't behave like a typical success. Radio stations struggled with its length. Traditional audiences didn't immediately embrace it, and yet in underground spaces, something was happening. Clubs couldn't get enough. DJs kept spinning it. Slowly, its hypnotic rhythm spread across Europe and beyond. Without a traditional hit formula, it broke every rule, and still won. Years later, it became the best-selling 12-inch single of all time. A track that started as an outsider became a blueprint for electronic music. It didn't just become a hit, it changed the industry. What looked like a niche experiment turned into a global revolution. Number 11. Everybody Wants to Rule the World, 1985. Even Tears for Fears weren't sure about Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It was written quickly, almost as an afterthought. Not the kind of song you expect to define a career. When it first released, expectations were modest. It wasn't positioned as the biggest track on the album, and in a decade filled with louder, more aggressive sounds, its laid-back tone felt risky. But then radio embraced it. Listeners connected with its smooth melody and deeper message. It began climbing charts, quietly but steadily. Over time, it transformed into one of the most recognizable songs of the 80s. Films, covers, and streaming gave it new life again and again. What started as a near throwaway became a global anthem, a reminder that sometimes, the songs you doubt the most are the ones the world remembers forever. Number 10. Don't Stop Believin', 1981. Few songs in history have had a stranger journey than Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. Today, it feels unstoppable. Back then, it was anything but. Released as part of a successful album, the track itself didn't dominate charts immediately. It peaked modestly compared to other hits of the era. Radio rotation was steady, not explosive. For years, it lived in the shadow of bigger, louder anthems. Then something unexpected happened. Decades later, television changed everything. A single moment in pop culture reintroduced the song to millions. Suddenly, a new generation claimed it as their own. Digital downloads exploded, streaming numbers climbed into the billions. It became one of the most downloaded songs in history. Not revived, reborn. Now it closes concerts, fills stadiums, and defines nostalgia itself. A song that once hovered quietly in the background became the loudest voice in the room, not because it changed, but because the world finally caught up to it. Number 9. How Soon Is Now, 1984. There's something haunting about How Soon Is Now by the Smiths, a sound that didn't fit neatly anywhere. And that was the problem. Initially released as a B-side, it wasn't treated like a major single. Radio didn't push it aggressively. Its unconventional structure and heavy atmosphere made it difficult to categorize. It lingered rather than exploded. But in underground circles, it began to grow. Slowly, quietly, the guitar tone alone became iconic. That hypnotic, almost suffocating sound pulled listeners in. Over time, it escaped its original limitations. Re-releases gave it new life. Film and television placements introduced it to wider audiences, and suddenly the song that once sat on the sidelines became central to alternative music history. Now it stands as one of the most influential tracks ever recorded, not a traditional hit, something deeper, a song that didn't need charts to prove its power because its impact never stopped expanding. Number 8. Time After Time, 1983. Soft songs rarely win in loud decades. That was the challenge facing Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. Surrounded by bold visuals and high-energy hits, this track felt almost too gentle. Early expectations were limited. It wasn't positioned as the standout. It's not just another ballad in a competitive market. Yet something about it refused to fade. Listeners connected with its sincerity. Radio began to lean into it. Slowly it climbed. Then came longevity, covers, soundtracks, emotional moments tied to the song across decades. It transformed from a simple release into a universal expression of memory and longing. Today, it's one of the most covered songs of all time, a track that didn't scream for attention but earned it, piece by piece, proof that sometimes the quietest voice leaves the deepest mark. Number 7. I Melt With You, 1982. Not every song becomes a hit on the charts. Some take a different route. That's exactly what happened with I Melt With You by Modern English. At release, it barely made a dent. Chart performance was underwhelming. Radio support was limited. It looked like another forgotten track from the early 80s. Then came the slow burn. Films picked it up, advertisers noticed its nostalgic tone. Suddenly, it started appearing everywhere, but years after its release. Each appearance added another layer of recognition. Audiences began to associate it with emotion, memory, and timelessness. Not a hit in the traditional sense, but something more enduring. Today, it's impossible to ignore. A cultural staple that refuses to disappear. It didn't win immediately. It endured, and in the long run, endurance proved far more powerful than instant success. Number 6. Africa, 1982. Few songs have been rediscovered as dramatically as Africa by Toto. Back in the early 80s, it was successful, but not dominant enough to define its era. It shared space with bigger trends and louder movements. Over time, it faded into nostalgia. Then the internet happened. Decades later, a new generation found it. Memes spread, covers exploded in popularity. Online communities turned it into a phenomenon. Suddenly, a song from another era became part of modern culture. Streaming numbers surged. Live performances drew massive reactions. What once felt like a relic became timeless. Now it exists in two worlds at once, a classic from the past and a viral giant of the present, not just remembered, but reborn in a way few songs ever achieve. Number 5. Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, 1983. Nothing about Sweet Dreams Are Made of This by Eurythmics sounded safe, minimalist, cold, unusual. It didn't match the polished pop dominating the charts at the time. Early reception reflected that uncertainty. The track struggled to gain traction initially. It wasn't instantly embraced by radio. It felt too different, too stripped down, almost unfinished to some listeners. Then visuals changed everything. MTV began pushing the now iconic video. Suddenly, the sound made sense. The imagery amplified the mood. Audiences started paying attention. Momentum built fast. What once felt like a risk became a defining sound of the decade. The song climbed charts globally and refused to fade afterward. Today, it's more than a hit. It's a blueprint, a reminder that standing out can look like failure at first, until the world realizes it was ahead of its time all along. Number 4. Into the Groove, 1985. Not every hit begins as a priority. Into the Groove by Madonna almost slipped through the cracks. Originally tied to a film soundtrack, it wasn't even given a proper standalone release in some major markets. No massive launch, no immediate chart domination, just a track sitting quietly in the background. Yet clubs reacted differently. Dance floors lit up. DJs kept playing it. Energy spread from underground scenes outward. Soon, demand became impossible to ignore. International markets embraced it fully. It climbed charts across Europe and beyond, becoming one of the biggest dance hits of the decade. Over time, it evolved into one of Madonna's most recognizable songs, not because it was pushed, but because it was pulled upward by pure audience response. A near miss turned into a defining moment, proof that sometimes the crowd decides what becomes legendary. Number 3. Take On Me, 1984. Failure came first. That's the part many forget about Take On Me by a-ha. The original release barely registered. Weak chart performance, limited attention. It looked like the song would disappear without a trace, but the band didn't give up. They reworked it, re-recorded it, and then came the video. A groundbreaking visual style, part animation, part live action, captured global attention instantly. Suddenly, the same song felt completely different. This time, it exploded. Charts across the world lit up. The track became unavoidable. Decades later, it remains one of the most recognizable songs ever created, not just for its sound, but for its reinvention story, a complete turnaround, from failure to phenomenon. Sat not by chance, but by persistence and one perfect creative decision that changed everything. Number 2. Don't You Forget About Me, 1985. Some songs succeed despite resistance. Don't You Forget About Me, by Simple Minds, almost didn't exist in the form we know today. The band initially refused to record it. It wasn't written by them. It didn't match their style. Reluctance surrounded the entire process. Even after release, expectations were uncertain. It was tied closely to a film, which can limit a song's identity. There was no guarantee it would stand on its own. Then the film connected. Audiences embraced both the story and the sound. The song became inseparable from that emotional experience. Momentum followed quickly. Charts responded. Global recognition grew. Now it's impossible to separate the track from its legacy. A song once resisted became the defining anthem of a generation, not because it was planned, but because it resonated at exactly the right moment. Number 1. Running Up That Hill, 1985. Time changed everything for Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush. Back in the 80s, it performed well, but not globally dominant. It didn't fully break into some major markets. For years, it remained respected, but not universally massive. Then decades passed. A single cultural moment brought it back. A new generation discovered it all at once. Streaming numbers surged overnight. Charts that once resisted it now crowned it. The song reached heights it never achieved during its original release. Not just a comeback, a complete redefinition. Its emotional intensity, once niche, became universal. Its message traveled further than ever before. Now it stands as one of the most powerful examples of delayed success in music history. A song that didn't just return, but conquered a world that finally understood it. Not every hit is instant. Some wait, some struggle, some disappear before rising again. These songs didn't just succeed, they survived long enough to be rediscovered, and that makes them unforgettable. If you enjoyed this journey through music's greatest comebacks, stay tuned, because the past still has stories waiting to explode.